Hey, so when I was recording this interview, I didn't actually realize that one of my cameras was acting up and didn't notice it until post-production. Just wanted to apologize for the fact that this week's episode's probably not going to look as good as the rest of them. That being said, there's still lots of really great stuff in this interview, and I still hope that you really enjoy it. On with the show. Hi, welcome to Colors of Cariboo, the podcast where I interview rural artists and ask them why. Why do they want to create in a land that is so wild that it can't help but change from one day to the next? I'm your host, Rohan. We're looking right now at the mighty Fraser River. A couple of months before filming, this river suffered major flooding caused by a landslide on the Chilcotin River. It devastated local wildlife, land, and historical sites along its banks, and is a prime example of how wild this land really is. What was lost now really only exists in memories, stories, and, thanks to modern technology, photographs. In fact, if you ever see a photo of the Cariboo-Chilcotin area, chances are it was probably taken by our next guest, Chris Harris. Chris has been adventuring and photographing the Cariboo-Chilcotin for decades, playing a massive role in showcasing this relatively unknown region to the rest of the world. His guided tours as a mountaineer, his self-published books, and the workshops he's hosted for people all across the globe speaks to a deep, intimate connection and love that he has for this land. And I'm really glad that we got a chance to connect with him at his art gallery at the 108 Mile House. So, grab a chair, grab a drink, and let's get started. Welcome to Colors of Cariboo, stories of wild creativity. And I'm looking off into the distance again. Today's episode was filmed on the traditional, unceded territory of the Secwepemc peoples, specifically the Cheskin or Kahnam Band. Welcome back to Colors of Cariboo. Today we've got the one and only Chris Harris with us today. How you doing today, Chris?
I'm great, thanks, Rohan.
Oh, it's great to hear. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
First of all, I'm a photographer. I've had a camera in my hand most of my life. My dad gave me a camera when I was 20. And, back in the 60s and the hippie days, I traveled the world. I photographed everywhere I went. And it definitely became a huge part of my life. So it just happened, I was, after my world travels, I went back to university in Fredericton, New Brunswick. And I was just about to finish my last exam when I walked into the university bookstore and I saw a calendar, a Sierra Club calendar, and it was about the coast mountains of British Columbia. And I looked at that calendar, and I looked at those images, and I was mesmerized. I just knew I had to go there. I just had the calling for the mountains. So I went down and bought myself a railway ticket. As soon as I finished my last exam, I was on the train to Vancouver, and I never returned back east for another 40 years. So then, of course, I was in Vancouver. I got a job as a teacher, as I got my degree in education. But those images of the mountains, the coast mountains, they were still had a calling, and so I joined the Alpine Club of Canada and the British Columbia Mountaineering Club, and they had trips and workshops, and it provided an opportunity for me to explore the province, or at least the lower mainland area in the mountains, every single weekend. So even though I was teaching every day, every weekend I was gone, and I learned the craft of mountaineering slowly but surely, and it became an even greater part of my life. So adventure and photography became my two main passions.
Kind of hard to think of anything that doesn't go better together than adventuring and photos.
They just work so well together. Yeah. And then, eventually I was teaching in the regular classroom, but I didn't really enjoy it. And by this time I was totally ensconced with the outdoor world. And so I approached my principal with an idea of starting an outdoor education program within the Vancouver School Board system. So I did. I got that off the ground, started that. And so teaching teenagers about outdoor education and survival and all that. I heard about a cross-country ski marathon in 100 Mile House in the middle of the Cariboo. I had no idea where the Cariboo was, and I had to look up where 100 Mile House was. But it was the second largest ski marathon in Canada. It was very famous. People came from all over to ski in this marathon. So I decided to bring up my outdoor education students. And we came up and we skied in the marathon. And we danced all night, and I was exposed to this romantic area. It was very friendly. Everyone was very friendly up here. But I can remember skiing and skiing through alpine groves and seeing cowboys on horses out on the ranch lands and log cabins on the lake shores where you could open the door and put your skis on and just head out. I said, my God, like no one has ever told me about this before. So when I realized I was never going to get off the ground and be able to buy a home in Vancouver with my new lifestyle, which was all centered around being in the mountains, I remembered the Cariboo and I remembered 100 Mile House. And so that brought me back to the region where I bought my first home, and I've been here ever since. I just totally embraced this region, and there's a sense of place here that I just had never found anywhere else. So I'm just happy to be here. I've been here now since 1984. So I think that's 40 years.
I think, yeah, about that. Yeah. There's definitely a calling to this place here that
I know.
Even if you don't, like, if you've lived here, there's always a little bit of like, nope, I need to come back. And if you haven't lived here, but as soon as you get a little bit of that bug, it is like, nope, I need to be here.
I know, and my lifestyle, by this time I had started my own adventure tour company. So when I left the school board, I was a guide. I was a wilderness guide, and I ran tours all over Western Canada, and that's how I made my living. So that enabled me to live anywhere. It didn't make any difference where I lived, because I would travel to the places where I ran my tours and so on. And I photographed all my tours in order to market my tours. So as you say, photography and adventure really came together. So how was I going to make a living out here? Well, I had my tour business, but photography as an art form also had a great calling for me. So as you know, art is all about expression. To me, in terms of expressing myself and my passions in life, my two passions were adventure and photography. And so how was I going to combine that? So, in terms of the adventure side of things, I was always out canoeing and hiking and exploring by horse, exploring the country, looking for new areas to run tours. And from a visual perspective, I was captivated by the beauty and the diversity of this region. And so I just tried to tie the two together, and it ended up where I started to publish my own work. I started to publish books on the region, and I amassed the largest collection of imagery on the region everywhere, because wherever I went, it seemed no one had ever photographed it before, and certainly no one had ever done a book on anything here on the, at least a photographic book on the region. So everything was a first, everything was wide open, and the land was filled with possibilities. Like, it was heaven to me. Where else could you go and photograph where no one else had photographed before? Like all the big name photographers were traveling the world, discovering all these amazing places, but the Cariboo, and especially the Chilcotin just west of Williams Lake, it just hadn't been discovered yet at all.
And being able to being able to again explore those as an adventure and then photograph them and then tell those stories to the world, especially when no one else has done that. That is mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling.
It's
It really
because
was.
it's so gorgeous out there.
Yes.
And I mean, I think a lot of the reason I know it's gorgeous is because of folks like yourself who have gone out and who have explored and been like, hey, look at this place, this is amazing, or hey, look at this place.
You know, there's so much power in photography. Photography brings about action. You know, like, for example, the calendar, the pictures and the photographs in the calendar brought me out west. And, you know, we look at pictures and say, oh, you know, I'd like to, let's go on our holidays there, you know. So, you know, tourism is the biggest industry in the world, and it's driven by the visual arts. So, yeah, it was remarkable that that right at my doorstep, you know, get out, just drive away from home here at the 108, and it was like, well, okay, what direction do I want to go here? Because it had never been photographed before. It was a dream. So you know, when we talk about the uniqueness of this area, to me, it was unexplored wilderness and biodiversity. So I have a bit of a story about diversity here because I think it's really important that people know how diverse and how valuable this diversity is. But I was out photographing for my last book. So I was out in the Chilcotin, and I came across, I heard the term Chilcotin Arc. I had never heard of it before. In all my travels and adventures, I'd never heard of Chilcotin Arc. So I did some research, and I eventually found someone who knew a little bit about what it was, and he said, you should meet a chap named Dave Needs. And so I got in touch with Dave Needs, and I told him what I was doing, and he said, well, why don't you come down and visit me, and we'll talk about the Chilcotin Arc. Well, Dave lived down in the precipice, which is a huge volcanic gorge that connects the plateau with the Bella Coola Valley and the coast. It's a trading route. It has been a trading route for indigenous peoples for centuries and centuries. And so I went to see Dave. I drove down his driveway, which was 16 kilometers long, in the middle of absolutely nowhere, completely off the grid. And we spent 2 days, and the maps were out on the table, and he told me all about the Chilcotin Arc. So this area, known as the Chilcotin Arc, it is the largest, contiguous, most biodiverse wilderness complex anywhere in the temperate world, if not the world. You know, it's bigger than Jasper and national parks combined, or it's bigger than the country of Belgium. And it's untouched, and it has such diversity. You know, you have the Coast Mountains, which has an elevation variance of 4,000 feet up to the top of Mount Waddington. It has the Alplands, which is in the foothills of the Coast Mountains, where it's has the largest concentration of alpine lakes anywhere in North America. You have the Chilcotin Plateau, which is volcanic. There are 3 huge volcanoes in the West Chilcotin, which are spectacular in their own right. And there were hundreds of volcanoes just west of Williams Lake, which flooded this whole region with layer upon layer of lava, which is right below us, right here. And then you have, on the eastern end of the Chilcotin Plateau, we have the grasslands. It's one of the rarest grassland biomes anywhere on the planet as well. It has grasses growing there that don't exist anywhere else in the world. So basically what you have is a global hotspot of biodiversity right here in this Cariboo-Chilcotin region. And I just said to Dave, I said, well, this is an amazing story, but no one knows about it. Like, it's a secret. So I said, I'm just about to publish this book on the region, and I'm out photographing it right now. Do you mind if I include this story and bring it to the world? And he said, absolutely not. He said, I'll help you in any way I can. So in this most recent book called The Cariboo-Chilcotin Coast, A Photographer's Journey, I include the story of the Chilcotin Arc, and I have photographed it, and I've written about it, and I've brought the whole concept of the arc to the world through photography and adventure. You know, it's combining those two things once again. And the purpose of all this work, the purpose of the books, the purpose of the imagery, is to generate a sense of place for people, especially people who live here, but also for visitors who come from afar. We're related to the land that we live on. It's important to us. And a sense of place, an understanding of place, developing a relationship with a place. When you combine all that together, you end up with a value for the place where you live. That's the main thrust of all my work as a visual artist, was to bring a visual identity to the region. And I think it has over time. I've had people say they've actually moved to the region as a result of either being at a presentation or have seen one of my books and so on. It's a nice feeling to have brought that awareness to a region that is so spectacular and so diverse that, it needed a new sense of awareness and a new visual identity.
I think that's really interesting that you brought up the purpose of giving people a sense of place, because I know, and it's something that I felt, and I know that I've had conversations with other people about, is that lack of a sense of belonging somewhere. And I think to bring that sense of belonging to a place, and that's the magical thing about photography, is that it captures, I've always seen it as it captures a moment in time, like a perfect
Absolutely.
moment in time.
Absolutely. So I've done 13 books on the region. And I self-published these because no publisher would have anything to do with my work. So I had no choice. But I would choose a subject, and then I would give myself 2 years, and I would give it everything I had. I would explore nonstop and photograph and bring it together. But then my wife and we would go on tour. And my wife has been a big part of this, and I'm blessed to be surrounded by a lot of very talented people, like book designers and editors, and a lot of people are behind the scenes coming together, to help bring these books together. When a book was released, we would go on tour and make presentations all across the country, all the way to Montreal. And we would tell the stories behind the images and some of the adventures, and show the beauty and diversity of the region. And we didn't have to go very far to realize that hardly anyone knew anything about the Cariboo-Chilcotin, and they were amazed at what they were seeing and what they were hearing. It was exciting. It was so rich. It was such a rich experience to travel throughout our country, the entire country, and talk about a little tiny area of British Columbia that most British Columbians didn't know very much about. So it was quite an adventure. I have developed such a sense of place myself here, and we built this gallery, and people now come from all over the world, and I'm able to sit down and show them a video on the region, and like a tourist center.
Yeah. And be able to share that story, be able to share, essentially the story of the Cariboo-Chilcotin with the world, with everybody. And you've taken parts of your story, but you've also taken the story of the whole region and kind of woven the two of you together. And now you're sharing it to everybody that you can.
Yeah, no, you can't. It's not worth keeping areas like that a secret, because education, people need to be educated. It's only when you know a subject and you develop a relation, it's like a human relationship. If you get to understand your partner and value your partner, you're going to stick up for them, and you're going to come to their rescue if need be. And we need to do the same thing for the land we live off of. If we understand what we have, basically, I think we're in love.
Yeah.
You protect what you love. One of my favorite authors is Robert McFarlane, in terms of writing about the natural world. And he said that images are the relationship between the land and the human heart. And I loved that, because, photographing this area that was my expression as an artist. That was my human heart. It drove me out there to explore and to photograph. And so now I'm sharing that relationship with the, between my relationship with the land, which is really important to me, the land and my imagery. And if I can bring that to the world, then I'm blessed. I feel very grateful. So I had this urge to share what I was discovering. And that's why I started an outdoor education program for high school kids. And eventually I started my own adventure tour company so I could take people out to experience the natural world. That's a big part of my expression. Is the physical side as well as the visual perspective.
Yeah.
It's combining the two again, and sharing the world and trying to educate people and helping them to value and understand their own relationship with the land.
So like the idea of like you creating like an adventure company and mixing that with your photography, bringing the two together and like providing those experiences with the photography is like, that's almost like it's a very interactive photo gallery experience where the photo gallery is right literally where you go.
Well, life is art. Without art, culturally, we'd be so poor. I don't think we'd survive.
Yep.
Art is important in our life. Beauty, the importance of beauty in our lives is immense. So, people say, well, how did you ever survive as an artist in a remote area? Well, the remoteness actually was the blessing in disguise. But, of course, I still had to get it out to the world to sell my books and so on. And one of the things I did, because the internet was just starting, one of the things I did was start a newsletter, an online newsletter. In my newsletter, I would talk about photography. I would sort of teach photography in a way, then I would take people on all these adventures. So I was sharing. It was another way for me to share this sense of place that I was developing here. I put out a newsletter every month. And I'm over 200 now. It's been 15 years of putting out a newsletter every month until COVID, and now it's every 2 months. But 15 years of putting out a newsletter that goes, I don't know where it goes, but it talks about this region. And that was it. That was incredible. So there's the gallery, there's the books, there's presenting, being on tour, and the newsletters. It's amazing what you can do living in a remote area. Like my client is the earth. I don't have to be in Vancouver where there's thousands of clients because you can just get lost. So being in a rural area like this has been a blessing in disguise for me.
Being here, like having a gallery again, this doesn't seem like something that like is in the normal zeitgeist of like what people expect from an artist. No. Like especially there, but you're doing something in a way that a lot of folks just aren't able to do, and you're doing it because that's just how it works. That's just like, nope, I needed to come up with a way to make this work, and this is how I did it.
Yes. Well, talking about art, in 2017, that's when my last book was published. And the world was changing. Books were not as popular as they once were. And I knew I could never do another book. And I had done, I sort of had done my thing with books. So all of a sudden, I didn't have a project. Because for 35 years, I always had a project. A big project that I could really dig into. And now it's all of a sudden, what am I going to do? So I had to reinvent myself. So I started to read about art history, about art movements, artists, art pieces, and I began to realize that these great art movements that have changed the world really were started by courageous artists who were willing to jump out of the box, leave the mainstream, who decided to use the tool of their craft, a paintbrush, referring mostly to paintings now. They decided to use the paintbrush, the tool of their craft, just slightly differently. Instead of big brush strokes, dots and dashes and points, and they began to express light differently and depth differently. And I said, well, that's not rocket science, just changing how you move your paintbrush. I said, the tool of my craft is a camera. I said, I can move my camera. I can do different things with my camera too. So photography is an art form. Why can't I become a photographic impressionist or a photographic cubist or an abstractionist? And so that's what I decided to do. So I became ruthless at experimenting. I call it artistic experimentation. I try anything and everything, and I move my camera, and I can stand on my head and take pictures. It doesn't make any difference. I hardly ever use a tripod anymore, like the old days, use a tripod, make sure everything's still. And now it's anything but that. And so now I'm creating all kinds of photography as an art form that is, in many cases, it's entirely new in the photographic world, actually. It's amazing. And I started workshops called Develop Your Creative Vision. Well, creativity means original, and vision means seeing. So in other words, how to see differently, how to see in new ways. And so we had 7-day workshops on how to see in new ways through your camera. And it's all done in camera. It's not using secondary software. And and these workshops were full from the Gulf Islands all the way to Montreal. And it was the richest part of my whole photographic career, because now photographic expression is absolutely limitless. I don't have to travel far to exotic lands. I can be an abstractionist no matter where I am. I can shoot everything that I've done before in a new way. So all of a sudden the world's opened up again, and life couldn't be more exciting in terms of art. I could move my camera in any way I wanted, and I also found on my camera I had a function. It was called multiple exposure. Well, if you go into a camera store and ask for a camera that has multiple exposure function, they wouldn't know what it was, because no one uses it. No one knows what it is. Well, I discovered that my camera, which is an old camera, it's actually 9 or 10, they don't even make them anymore. It has the capability of taking 9 exposures. So that means I could move my camera in a different way for every one of those 9 if I wanted to take 9 instead of 5. I could include 9 different subjects, and then at the end of the 9, the camera would show me the result of all those put together. So all of a sudden, I could take between 1 and 9, do anything and take any number of subjects. Well, obviously, the possibilities are beyond comprehension. There's no limit to anything anymore. It's art. It's endless.
You've created something brand new. You've created something that hasn't.
In some cases, it's I've never seen it anywhere.
Yeah. And that is.
And a lot of people were afraid to take the workshops because it was so new, and it was scary, actually. A lot of people are very uncomfortable moving and shaking and jumping up and down when they take pictures.
Well, if you have like $1,000 camera, it's
but those who did join us, and many of them joined us every single year to learn something new, and because I brought it upon myself. I put pressure on myself to come up with new expressions, new ways of expressing myself, so I'd have something new to teach. So it was fantastic, and still is fantastic.
And so you started that work, what was some of the first places or people or things that you took with that, or that you started experimenting with?
Well, I could start right here in the garden in front of the house. It actually doesn't matter where I was. But, as one of my earliest expressions was Impressionism, photographic Impressionism. The picture behind you, after the forest fire, I tried to do forest fire skies.
Oh. Okay.
Those skies are made of flowers in the garden. So, I look at that book there and I say, well, painters can paint skies any color they want.
Yeah.
They can do anything they want, so why can't I? So,
I look at that. I look at this stuff and I'm like, It is so hard to be like, I visually know that it's not a painting, but it looks like a painting.
Well, a lot of people come in here and say, "Oh, I thought you were a photographer." And I said, "Well, I am."
And like that is that is mind blowing. That because I'd never when doing some of the research, looking into a little bit of the works that you've been doing, I saw that on your site, and I'm like, I barely know how to use a camera. I don't even know how you would get something like that. And I've seen it with with people will use like generative AI and things like that to make those, which
I know nowadays, yeah.
But to be able to look at that and be like, nope, this was like, I used the tools that I had, I used what was available to me, and I just used it in a completely new and unique, different perspective.
It's a real art form now. Like, it really is art.
That makes a really interesting idea of that you're like, because again, like photography and like painting are like they're purely visual, like, well, you think they're purely visual mediums, but like you can have such an influence on both of them because you're capturing something in that. And whereas with like a stage production or like a movie or something like that, like these, like, and I think I mentioned it, like you're capturing a moment in time, but again, it's but you're also capturing, I guess, perception. You're capturing how you are seeing the world and how you think the world can be seen.
There's a road just south of 70 Mile House called Meadow Lake Road that goes all the way out to the Gang Ranch and the grasslands around Churn Creek and so on. And I used to travel, I did a book on the grasslands. So I used to travel that road extensively. And I would drive all the way down into the Fraser River Canyon. And now with my new types of photographic expression, I go down that road and I never get beyond 30 kilometers down the road. I can't because there's too much possibility there. And yet at one point my focus was on at the end of the road, so I would drive by it and I was totally unaware of what I was passing. Now it's beyond belief what's there. So I can bring the ordinary into the extraordinary now, and so when I go off to photograph, like say I said, okay, today I'm going to go drive down Meadow Lake Road. I have no idea when I'm leaving where I'm going to go, where I'm going to end up, what I'm going to photograph, how I'm going to photograph. I just follow my intuition and I try experimenting and I just follow my resonance. Like whatever I see is working during my experimentation process, then I follow that excitement, and I follow it. And I don't know where I'm going to go. It's an amazing feeling. And I come back to curate my images. It's like, whoa, man, I had no idea that I was going there.
Yeah, I can't help but feel there's this like sense of like you came here because of the mountains. You came here because of these grandiose, amazing landmarks, and then you're slowly shifting. You're slowly going in from the macro to the micro there.
Yes. That's another wonderful selling point about living in a rural area is the simplicity by which you live. When I go down to the city now, there's so much input coming in that I don't know what I would want to do either. Like it's too confusing. I'd be lost. But here, life is simpler.
And you're able to take that chance to breathe.
It's so important.
And I think, especially for artistic mediums too, is that sometimes like there are lots of folks who like are probably really good in the hustle and bustle. They love that busy work. They
absolutely.
love that.
No.
But I think, and like you're not the first person I've talked to who's actually said it's like being in a place like this, I get a chance to just like absorb everything that comes in. I get a chance to let everything sink in.
It's not just a place to come to when you retire.
Yeah.
This is a place to live and live very fully.
Yeah.
And probably, as what happened to me, I ended up living a life that I never knew existed. When I came from back east, I didn't know you could become a wilderness guide or like a tour guide. Like I had never been exposed to the wilderness, the mountains and bears and all that. I didn't know this world existed. You know, I had to find it somehow.
Now, there are 3 questions that I ask everybody at the end of the show.
Right.
Or like just kind of as like a little tailor there. First question is, if you were to spend a week with anybody in the world, past or present, who would it be and why?
Who would it be and why?
And it could be anybody you want.
One gentleman comes to mind. His name is Tony O'Malley. He's an Irish painter. He's passed away he has passed away, but he was the husband of my sister. I had a younger sister who was a painter and who married an Irishman, Tony O'Malley. He was a pauper. He was unhealthy. He had 6 months to live. My sister married him, told him he wasn't going to die, changed his diet, and he went on to become one of Ireland's most famous painters in Irish history. He had nothing, but he just kept going. He followed his passion, and he never stopped painting. He considered it his work. He thought of it as his work, and he went to work every day, and he painted. And eventually, his paintings became so famous. And he wasn't interested in the fame, actually. He was a man of zero ego, I think. And he was a highly intelligent gentleman who loved to read and paint. He's a philosopher. But he stuck with his dream. And he was brought up in a time when painting was not considered a thing to do in Ireland. You didn't want to become a painter. But he stuck with it, and he made something of his life that went far, far beyond the wildest dreams of his. So he's been an inspiration. I've seen him move his styles over the years of expression, and he just believed in himself, and he believed in his work. And I find him a very inspirational artist and person. And he was married to my sister, so I knew him well.
Yeah.
I really knew him well. And it's a very famous name in Ireland now. I mean, it's big time. It's big time, actually.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to look him up now.
Yeah, Tony O'Malley. It's, there's a book right there.
Okay.
There's about 13 books on their love and life together. And my sister went to St. Ives, which was in Cornwall in southwest England. It was an artist colony. Artists went there. Emily Carr went there. All the European painters, Turner, they all went there because of the light. It was an artist community. And so my sister went there to go to an art school, and that's where she met Tony. Tony was 35 years older than she was. She was in her 20s. He's 35 years older and in terrible health, living off a frying pan day to day, trying to sell his painting. My sister fell in love. That was it. And they got married. And like I said, she just told him that he wasn't going to die. And I like to say that she just loved him to life. And he didn't die. They spent 30 years together painting every single day the rest of their lives. And they returned to Ireland, to his home. He had to leave Ireland because painting was he was afraid to be known as someone who painted. When anything he painted, he hid under his bed. And so it's an amazing love story. It's an amazing story. There's talk of even making a movie, a film out of their love and life together, because it's a story of going from nothing to becoming a national figure in Ireland.
And on the back of love.
And on the back of love. Yeah, no, it's an amazing story.
I love that. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for sharing that.
That's my person.
I think it's an excellent choice of a person there. So, okay. Now I need to remember the second question. Question number 2. What is the favorite compliment that you have ever been given?
I don't know if this is a compliment, but I heard a photographer. I went to a presentation by a world-renowned nature photographer, a Dutch photographer, and he had just been hired by National Geographic, and he was being sent on his first assignment. And the chief editor called him in for a meeting before he left, and he discussed the project. And so when the meeting was over, Franz was about to leave, and he said, "Oh, Franz," he said, "one more thing I want to tell you." He said, "Just remember, there are no excuses." Meaning, if National Geographic was going to spend $400,000 sending all its equipment and everything to Madagascar, don't come back and say, "You know, it rained every day. I'm sorry, I didn't get anything." It's like, just remember, there are no excuses. Well, I've never forgotten those words, because when I'm out hiking across the Itcha volcano, I know that's a one of. I'm not going to return to hike across the Itcha volcano again. And I have to get images for my book. You know, the fact that it's pouring snow in the middle of the summer and there's a hailstorm and fog and I don't know where I'm going and the conditions are tough, I just draw on that because those words have become an inspiration to me. So they're words of inspiration. Okay, there are no excuses. So, Chris, it doesn't make any difference how tough things are. There are no excuses. You have to get your images, no matter what. You know, if it means staying up all night, if it means photographing in the rain, in the snow, it doesn't make any difference. You're here. You're here for a reason. You're supposed to be good at what you do. Do it. So it's not exactly a compliment, but there are words of inspiration that I have kept with me wherever I went.
Excellent. You know, that actually kind of almost answers the last question too. Like, it's both, because the last question is, what's your favorite piece of advice you've been given, or something and a piece of advice that you wish you had been given? And that, I mean, maybe there's probably a different one, but I like that no excuses. That's a really good one.
You know, I think in the early parts of your life, you're often given advice that you don't really want to hear. It's not very meaningful for you because they're telling you what to do or how to do it, and it's not who you are. So to me, you know, like the most important advice is to encourage people to be who they are. And that's not easy. I can understand for parents who are concerned for the well-being of their child. And, you know, they want them to have the security and parents don't want to be responsible for them for the rest of their lives and all that. But, you know, you need to be who you are. That's your opportunity in life, is to express to the world who you are. And there's lots of amazing examples of people who have done that. But it takes courage. You need to be a bit of a risk taker. And when risk taking means there's failure involved. Yeah. And none of us like failure. So, but you have to get beyond that. So, be yourself and be courageous enough to follow your passions.
No matter what happens with
No matter what happens.
Excellent. So those are the three
I don't know if I answered your questions.
You know, no, you answered them perfectly. So I never know what the answers I'm going to get for those questions. So
really.
Do you have anything coming up? Any shows, anything, any works of art or any works that you're doing in the future here?
Well, I continue to put out my newsletter. People can subscribe on my website, which is just chrisharris.com. You can subscribe to my newsletter, or I also have another. I have what's called visual narratives, which I put out every week. which is about some aspect of photography and exploring and so on. It's short stories about places in the region. So, and I put on talks every once in a while here at the gallery, and people from the region, people come in from Williams Lake and so on, they come down and be part of a wonderful event here at the gallery and talk about art, and we talk about photography and art in different mediums and so on. So, well, I forget what your question was now. But
You're keeping busy. That's basically it. Just you've always got lots of stuff, and
lots going on. I'm retired, but not really.
Yeah.
not ever.
Excellent. Well,
Thank you so much, Rohan. It's been a wonderful time sharing with you.
It has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Chris, for coming on, and thanks to everybody for watching. And we'll see you on the next episode. And again, thank you so much, Chris.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to another episode. It was an amazing opportunity to meet with Chris at his art gallery at the 108 Mile, and I learned a lot more about my home than I was expecting, which is always such a wonderful gift. So much to explore, and I'm just reminded of how wild the Cariboo-Chilcotin still is. Everyone take care, and, well, maybe try some exploring of your own before the next episode.